Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Marla Billinghurst. I will be chairing the panel this afternoon, along with my co-panel members, Ms. Linda McFadden and Mr. Richard Whitbread. Representing the assessment department is Mr. Matthew Baracus, and our administrative personnel this afternoon is Ms. Phoebe Graywood. To the Zoom participants of the hearing, please note you are placed in the waiting room until your property is called upon. When it is your turn, you will be admitted into the meeting. Kindly follow along on the City of Winnipeg's Board of Revision YouTube channel for the hearing process. Excuse me. Once the host admits you into the hearing, please close or mute your YouTube player. You will then be permitted to speak with respect to your property. Once your hearing has concluded, you may leave the meeting. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1 through 6 on our docket today. Ms. Graywood, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Baracus, please state your full name.
Matthew Baracus.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, please state your full name.
Farah Cates.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You can be seated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first matter we'll be hearing on the docket this afternoon is 90 Alexander Avenue. Mr. Baracus, please proceed when you are ready.
All right. Thank you very much. File 24-4428, roll number 13099 072-185 90 Alexander Avenue. So with this one, we actually have a sub coming out on the property. I issued it back in November. I don't know why it wasn't processed already, but the value under appeal is actually not the value in my brief here. Hence, why Altus is asking for a confirmation on this property, because there is a forthcoming sub. The reason why this value is not the value that is under appeal is because I changed it in the system, and the way the brief is generated, it draws from the new value, even though the supplementary hasn't been issued yet. So it's actually the old value that's under appeal. So this appeal will be moot. I'll conclude my presentation with that, and maybe like Farah will be able to chip in as well in regards to what I'm saying. So I'll conclude my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates?
I have no questions, and we are asking for a confirmation under section 54(1) of the Municipal Assessment Act. Thank you.
Apologies, Madam Chair, could we just get the assessor to read the roll number into the record?
Oh yeah, no problem. 1309. Oh geez. 13099072185.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions for either party?
I do not.
Mr. Whitbread?
I do not either. Thanks.
Nor do I. Okay, thank you very much. So, we can move on to the next matter on the docket then. So that will be number 2 on the docket, 355 Kennedy Street.
All right, one moment. Just gotta pull it up.
Sure.
Okay. File number 24-2987, roll number 13053019000, 355 Kennedy Street, Manitoba Housing and Renewal, operated property. Total assessment is 12,816,000. There's an exempt portion as well. I don't believe it's under dispute here. It's 1977. One building, 11 stories. It's got 140 suites, 51 indoor parking, 0 outdoor parking. Page 3 shows our income workup. 91 bachelor, 4 1 bedroom, 54 2 bedroom. Average monthly rent is $872. And let me just double check something here quick. Okay, so we got a 4.3 vacancy rate, 52% expense ratio, and a 5.55 cap rate. Comes out to our valuation for the apartment side of the coin, $86,535 per unit. Rent comparables are found on page 5. The subject property falls within the range. I was looking for properties that had a decent proportion of bachelor units in the surrounding area. So when I look at Donald and Balmoral in particular, they're in the $900 range, and they're mostly bachelor units. So it's good support for the subject. Then I also did CMHC rental analysis here using the area, age, and size of it. And it shows that we're only 52% of the centennial rents. So, I mean, we have it knocked down to poor in our model to account for the fact that it's Manitoba Housing. The source tables are on page 8. Cap rate stuff is on page 9 and 10. You've all seen that before. Page 12, there's some permits here. There's one for $4.5 million in 2019 in terms of structural work, replacing main floor cladding, curtain walls, doors, and windows. A lot of exterior capital type work, mechanical and electrical as well. You can read that over yourself. Another permit here for 15. Just some interior work, demolition of interior walls, new partition walls, drywall repair, millwork, flooring, cosmetic work. 130,000. And then an older permit back from 2004. Page 15 is a picture from our pictometry program, and then there's one from Google Street View on page 16. It's housing. We're pretty low on the rents, supported by the comparables and the CMHC market report. And that's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So for the property overall, would you agree that the property's location in Central Park would be considered maybe a more challenging location?
Yeah, it's not a great area, I would say. I would agree with that, yeah.
And for the income value summary on page 3, is the model valuing the property as if it were social housing or as if it were a market apartment on the low end of the rental range?
Well, it is highest and best use would be market apartment running on a for-profit basis. So no, we don't value it as a social housing.
And then I guess just a point of clarification with the CMHC tables. The 52% looks, is that, I guess I'm just looking at the modeled rent that it shows, and that doesn't look like the modeled rent that's on your income value summary. So I guess just a point of clarification, it's not 52%.
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't really, let me double check here. Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, I just the comparables support the rent and they're in the area. The thing is, with Centennial, it can that the actual rent can be kind of dragged up by some of the newer like loft style conversions. So the primary weight of my analysis in regards to the income would fall in the rent comparables. So I'd ask the panel to direct their consideration to page 5 rather than the CMHC chart.
And then for your cap rate table on page 10, where it shows the range 4.75 to 5.45, do you have any information on how many sales are used or how many low rise versus high rise, et cetera?
I do not.
Okay. And for your calculate or for your cap rates on page 9, do you have the workups or just the final figures?
I just have the results in the table. I don't have the workups in my submission.
Okay, thank you. And then I also have some rebuttal when that time comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions for the assessor?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
Yes, I'm just looking at your page 10. And we're looking at a multifamily high rise, I take it, 4.75 to 5.45. You've gone outside the 5.45 above the 80th percentile. Would that suggest to us that you believe this building is in very good shape and has a lower degree of risk for a potential buyer?
Well, I mean, it's higher than the 80th percentile, so it's actually the other way around.
So I've got it backwards, hey?
Yeah.
It's a higher risk.
Well, it's the
Because-
area, it's like the attractiveness of the investment. That's what the cap rate is. It's just you know, the NOI, stabilized NOI versus the sale price, what a purchaser would expect to go for. And if they pay more, then the cap rate goes down, indicating there's more demand for it. If they pay less, the cap rate goes up.
Okay.
So, we're saying, you know, based on its location, maybe because it's got more bachelors, we're saying it's slightly above the 80th percentile, despite it not being really that overall too old as a 77.
But its location.
Yeah, it's
Have you been in the building?
I have not inspected any of the buildings today on the
Okay.
docket,
All
no.
right. So can you comment on the condition of the building?
Well, the permits beginning on page 12, that's why I put them in there.
Mm-hmm.
They did $4.5 million worth of work in 2019, and there's the description of it. What's great about housing is they always take out permits, so it's, well, we might be able to get into them prior to the hearing. There's a record. Main floor cladding replacement, curtain walls, doors, windows, structural work, including repairs to cast in place slabs, deck, a new steel framing for daycare roofing canopy, and reinforcement mechanical and electrical. So it looks like they invested a bunch of money into maintaining the asset. Now, with an understanding that it is Manitoba housing and that typically the units themselves are more utilitarian, I don't anticipate there being marble countertops, but it sounds like the structure has been taken care of.
Yeah, it sounds like that. One wouldn't know because we don't have photos, whether there's laminate flooring, changes to the kitchens, that sort of thing.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that, do I? Okay.
Neither do I.
Let me just see. Sorry, and that cap rate 5.55, that's individual to the apartments, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's
not-
just
It's not blended with the retail.
that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no questions. Ms. Cates, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have a summary of some of the facts of the property along with our requested assessment. So the main floor area is an exempt daycare space. We're not disputing that. That's at $701,000. And we are requesting an assessment of
This, sorry about that. They're still
Please,
here.
Linda?
Yeah,
okay, so I can continue.
I don't know, we have to confirm if they're actually present. Ms. McFadden? Are you still there? Oh, there you are. Okay. You can
Okay,
continue. Sorry about
perfect.
that.
So we are requesting an assessment of $9,283,000 on the class code 20 portion. If you turn to page 6, we have our property site maps. We have an aerial map view as well as a Google map view. And then an exterior photo on page 7. Property description on page 8. So the subject property is on the east side of Kennedy, north of Ellis in the Central Park area. It is an 11-story building built in the late 70s. There are 140 units, mostly bachelors, and there are 51 indoor parking stalls noted. So if you turn to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. So the subject property operates on a rent geared to income basis. So the income achieved by the property is not deemed to be at market. People pay what they can based on a proportion of their income. So what we do is we look to the market to find an appropriate rent. So we've looked to CMHC and we note that at October 2022, the rental rates in zone 1 to 4 core areas are $765 for a bachelor, $986 for a 1-bedroom, and $1,295 for a 2-bedroom unit. Now, in order to account for some of the differences between the market apartments used in the CMHC data and social housing, which is known to be more basic utility grade, we would typically take a factor of CMHC rents somewhere between 75 to 80%. So we're using 80% for the purpose of the analysis to be a bit more conservative, and we get a blended rent of $753 per unit per month. On page 14, we are using a market vacancy of 4.3% for the subject. And in regard to the expenses, we're not disputing the expenses of 52.1% of effective gross income, and that works out to $631,028. On page 15 and 16, we have a discussion of our approach to social housing cap rates. So from the valuation and market studies for affordable housing, what we do is we start at a market cap rate and then adjust upwards for the risk factors associated with social housing. Reason being that these properties don't typically transact, and when they do, they tend to have atypical conditions that wouldn't be appropriate for a cap rate study. So we would consider adjustments in 4 broad categories: low quality construction, advanced age, declining neighborhood, and low income tenancy. So on page 17, we have an overview of the discussion of low income tenancy, but essentially it is linked to deferred maintenance because these properties don't earn enough operating revenues to cover their expenses. They don't then have enough funds to then do those preventative items, as they typically rely on subsidies or other government funding to just keep them operational. So issues tend to build up over time, and it's not uncommon to have properties with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of deferred maintenance, some of which appears to have been addressed at this property in terms of deferred capital work. So on page 19, we have our cap rate for the subject. We are applying a 6.25% cap rate. We are considering a small adjustment for the social housing component, as well as a bigger locational adjustment. So on page 21, we have the valuation. So we are using an effective gross income of $1,211,185 with expenses of $631,028, gives a net operating income of $580,158 with a cap rate of 6.25, gives an indicated value of $9,283,000 rounded. And I've also submitted our cap rate study, which gives further context to our base cap rates and how we arrive at those. And then on page 23, we have the appendix. So we have included the valuation as well as just some further information regarding the social housing cap rates. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just a couple on page 19. Like, I also have some rebuttal to the cap rate
Okay.
study as well, but I'll go through the questions here first. So for the condition of the property, did you make an adjustment to the cap rate, your base cap rate, based on the condition of it?
I'd considered the condition, like typically when you go, I haven't visited this property. Typically, based on all of our site visits to different social housing properties, the units are typically, and the interiors are typically like below average to inferior. So in terms of an adjustment, I would consider an adjustment given social housing. I think the condition definitely ties in for sure.
Okay. Now that you've seen the $4.5 million permit from 2019, does that give you cause for consideration maybe to remove that adjustment you might have made to the cap?
In terms of the permit, I was reading through it and it looked like they were addressing deferred capital in terms of major items like structural items and stuff like that. Those can be quite expensive. Given that the property is built in the 70s, that's probably some of the first major work that they've done to it. But no, I'm still comfortable with the cap rate. Sometimes we even go much higher, like we'll sometimes use, 6.5 or closer to 7. So I think 6.25, given the location, I think it still makes sense for the property.
All right. And then you made an adjustment based on the low income tenancy, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But if it was sold on a for-profit basis, those low-income tenants wouldn't be there because the government wouldn't be subsidizing the new owner. Is that a fair comment?
That's true, but the low income tenancy, it's not specific to the tenants themselves, but rather the link to deferred maintenance. So like I said in the presentation, it does look like they've addressed at least some of that with the structural work, but typically even once that structural work's done, the interiors still require some work and they can be run down. So that would be kind of the context for the low income tenancy, but yes, I agree that if they sold this for profit, then it wouldn't be social housing anymore, but
Right.
adjustments still need to be made, given that it's always operated as social housing and issues have built up over time due to that.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McFadden. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
I do. So I don't, is it not so that the tenants who live there now, if they prefer to stay, they would have tenancy rights? Is that under the law? Would they not? Take the subsidy out of it, they would have tenancy rights.
I would imagine so.
Also, is it not true that the government does subsidize rent geared to income within private housing?
Yes, to my knowledge of the subject would be that likely because there isn't enough social housing to house everyone that needs it. There are some private apartments that have, when you look at the rent roll, they'll have some MHRC units, meaning, yeah, it'll be kind of the same arrangement where probably the tenant can pay what they can and then MHRC would subsidize the rest.
And in this particular location, in that level of building, is it not true that, in fact, the tenancy would probably continue to be largely low income unless there was a huge investment in the change of in the building, in the amenities, in the condition of the building?
Yes, I think that would be fair to say.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you. Nor do I. So Ms. Cates, if you have rebuttal evidence, you may present it now.
Okay, sounds good. I know everyone's heard it, so I'll just be very brief. So in terms of the rebuttal, we've essentially taken a look at some of the city's cap rates. We know that they don't necessarily publish their stabilizations, but essentially we've taken a look at some of their cap rates and tried to determine whether the income stream in place was the one that the purchaser was expecting to purchase. And what we discovered with a lot of them was that it wasn't, in fact. And so we've provided a variety of restabilizations of the city's cap rates. We are of the opinion that cap rates that are in the range of 3% and 4% are far too low for this market and do speak to the purchaser purchasing a different income stream. So what I've provided in the rebuttal is some restabilizations of 459 Sargent, 150 Hendon, and then just some commentary around some of the other cap rates, such as Maryland, the city's using the older sale, as well. A couple of their sales were purchased with the intent to renovate, such as St. Mary's and Arden. And I'll just leave it there. The board can review the stabilizations in more detail if they wish.
Thank you. Mr. Barakas, do you have any questions for Ms. Cates regarding her rebuttal evidence?
I think I'll just present mine. I know everyone's heard this before, so I won't drag it out. So no questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. McFadden, any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Nor do I. So, Mr. Assessor, please proceed with your rebuttal evidence.
Apologies, Miss Cates needs a copy. My
It's
coworker just,
It's okay.
one, I can bring it, like,
I've seen it before.
there was an additional document he provided. I can grab it if you want. It's just outside the door.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Grab it, thanks.
Madam Chair, do you have a copy of the rebuttal evidence from the assessor?
I'm trying to load it, but it's not, I can't get on the,
I can't find it in SharePoint.
nor can I. Ms. Graywood?
It should be under item 2. It'll say 242987 355 Kennedy A&T rebuttal. Just try refreshing if it's not there. It looks like it's there in my folder here.
I found it, yep.
You just give me mine.
No, I
It's
have two, sorry, I have two. ATT, oh, I see, ATT rebuttal, and then I have the applicant rebuttal. Is that what Ms. Cates just went through?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's not her capitalization study, the 125 pager.
No, that's it.
Yeah,
For
Okay.
document. Okay, we all good to go?
yeah,
Ms. McFadden?
Okay,
Yes.
I'll go fast. So it's just a rebuttal to the Aldous cap rates. So our contention is the first four, in particular, there's an insufficient amount of years available to stabilize a reliable net operating income to drive a cap rate from only to 3 years. And also another thing is they don't often, they're choosing a different effective gross income than what was previously reported, just to throw a little bit more doubt on it. And then the last one is just 2390 McPhillips. So we have a disagreement in terms of the rent. I use the actuals reported before the sale. You did an estimation. So I also included a second document. It says 738 St. Mary's tax bill. So if you guys could kindly open that up.
I had combined the documents, so it should be the first portion of the rebuttal evidence there.
So 738 St. Mary's is their second sale, or rather the third sale, sorry. And what's going on is the taxes that were reported on page 6 of the first doc of their stabilization, or my rebuttal, which is page 6, they use $3,000 in taxes. And so the taxes are misreported. The sale price is like 1.8. So I provided the actual tax bill, which is 15,674.52. So if we were to use the sale, which I wouldn't, because there's only 1 year, that doesn't meet standard, I suppose. But if you use the actual taxes, so you added the taxes in there back to the NOI, and then you remove the actual taxes, you'd have a corrected NOI of 82.51. And with that sale price, you're actually calculating a cap of 4.56. If you were to use the sale, which I wouldn't, I just wanted to point that out. So that's my rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Just one. When you're saying that sales are unusable because there's only 1 year of data, that would be just the assessment department's opinion. That's not based on like appraisal theory or IWO standards that you need to stabilize multiple years, correct?
Well, I mean, if you've got a bunch of sales that where you have multiple years, those would weigh more heavily. In my schooling, I knew handing in a sale with 1 year wouldn't. I'd probably get that project sent back. So though it might not be explicitly stated, in my opinion, you need at least more than 1 year to stabilize.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Nor do I. So thank you very much. Is there a need for a summary from either party?
I mean, just a little bit on this is a social housing property. I know this is a point of contention, but like if it was sold on the open market at its highest and best use, it would have to be the maximally financially profitable. And that's not having the government in there subsidizing the tenants. So there shouldn't be any, once that aspect is stripped away, there shouldn't be any cap premium placed on it. That's really our contention here. You can't, if we're going to change the rents, you can't use the old cap consideration for the social housing tenants that are no longer there. That's my summation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates.
I would just say we provide a lot of support from appraisal theory, prior orders in terms of our adjustments. So it is coming from, a rational place, and we do look at the property site specific, and I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can move on to the next matter on the docket then. Sorry, give me 1 second. It is, sorry, 400 Webb Place. I'm sorry, did we take care of the, I'm sorry, I had too many pieces of paper in front of me. Oh, sorry. And that one, you've taken care of the class liability appeal, correct? So it's only value?
Correct.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we are moving on to 400 Webb Place. Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you're ready.
One moment, just let me take a quick peek so I can streamline this thing. Okay. File 24-3276, roll number 13096033000, 400 Webb Place, 46,464,000. There are 3 lines of classification. Unless anything's changed, only class code 20 is in dispute, so I'll just tailor my presentation in that direction to move things along. 20 stories built in the late 80s. It's got 375 suites, 240 indoor parking spots. Page 2 shows no recent sales, and they've been good handing in their mailers. Page 3, 41 bachelor, 137 one bedroom, 197 two bedroom, 375 units in total. For the apartment, which is the second last column on the right, it's all modeled. We only got rent of 1,064.41, and so we have vacancy of 4.3, cap rate 5.5. For our estimated residential value of 40,772, or 108,725 per suite. Skip ahead to page 5. It shows the rent comparables. So rent comparables range from 965 to 1339. Comparable 2 and 2, 3, and 4 are comprised of bachelor units. Rather, no, 3 doesn't, sorry. So 2 and 4 do. And they actually bracket the rent that the model assigned the subject property. So those are the 2 properties I would put in a highest level of similarity to the subject. There are comparable leases on page 6 and 7 and 8, but as it's not in dispute, I'm not gonna go over them. Page 9 and 10 is our cap stuff. And then page 12 shows just the overhead. That's right downtown. Page 13 shows some of the features and amenities in terms of the exercise room, balconies, outdoor pool, recreation room, restaurant on site, etc. And then on page 15, it shows the 2022 income and expense mailer submitted to us. So what's going on with this is you can see that the commercial and residential expenses are combined with each other. So as there's no way to separate them, if we're gonna go ahead and like net out the net rates from the gross leases, then some of the expenses listed on page 15 would have to be reduced as well. But as we don't have a mechanism to do that, I just defer to the model on it. So wrapping it up, we got 108 per unit, I believe it was. Yeah, 108, 725 per unit. It's right downtown. Just went with the model on this one, didn't have a mechanism to really do a real good site specific on it. So that's my evidence.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So in regard to properties downtown compared to suburban, would you agree they typically have higher vacancy, like higher than 4%, perhaps even approaching, 7.5%, 10% in that range?
I think it varies property to property, but I have seen CMHC reports where the vacancy rate is closer to 7%, I believe.
That would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
I have no question. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions for the assessor?
I'm just checking his statements that he submitted, page 17. And there's no real indication of actual vacancy. So no, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, nor do I. So Ms. Cates, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have a summary of some of the facts of the property. I am going to be making a verbal correction to the value that I put here, so I'll just state all those numbers when I get to the income and expense summary. So if you turn to page 6, we have our property site maps, some exterior photos on page 7 and 8, and then a property description on page 9. So the subject property is at the southeast corner of Ellis and Vaughan, 2 20-story apartment blocks, and there are 375 units, 240 indoor parking stalls. So in terms of the income approach, at the time of completing the valuation, I had not realized that the expenses may be also inclusive of a different property. So I'm just going to be defaulting to the expense ratio in place just to not muddle things too much. So in terms of the potential market gross rents that we're applying, I'm applying $4,390,920. That's $976 per unit. That's based on what they report as their gross potential on the 2022 mailer. But we do note that there is significant vacancy at the property, both in terms of talking to the owner as well as what they put on their income and expense submission. They only actually receive an effective rent of $3,902,941. So that is quite a discrepancy there. It's over 10%. So I am applying a above market vacancy rate to the property in this case to account for the fact that it has more vacancy, and based on discussions with the owner, it seems like it's been consistent. So I'm applying a 7.5% vacancy. So I have an effective gross income of $4,061,601. In the initial valuation, I had accidentally accounted for the commercial income in the multifamily valuation, even though that had the separate stream. So I've taken that out. So again, the EGI would be 4,061,601. The expenses, I'm using the 51.1% expense ratio. That would be total expenses of $2,075,478. So 2,075,478. So my net operating income is $1,986,123. That's 1986123. And I'm going to use a 5.75% cap rate to be consistent with some of the properties to follow. Essentially, our base cap rate for a property this age group would be 5.5%. And I would consider a 0.25% location upward adjustment. And that would give an indicated value on residential of $34,541,000 rounded.
Read that again, please.
34,541,000 rounded.
Thank you.
And then in the brief, we have an appendix starting on page 17, provided just some of the building details valuation and then the financials. So you could see on page 25 where they report their gross potential, but then at the top note what they actually take in. And then on page 26 as well, they show that residential rent at 3.9 million. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Do you have any other like older income expense statements to, I guess, confirm the fact that there is a larger than typical vacancy issue over a long-term basis?
I was looking ahead of the hearing to see if I had older, but the older INEs that we had seemed to be speaking more to the parkade and not the apartment. So I didn't have additional financials to provide for the purpose of the hearing today.
Okay. All right, that's my only question.
Thank you. Ms. McFadden, any questions?
Can you give us a new total as well? So you changed the 20T. The other two remain the same, but the total will change, correct?
Yes, that's correct. My apologies. So I have then a new total of $40,233,000.
Okay, and just for clarification, you said that you removed the line that was additional income in your analysis?
Yes, because I mistakenly included the 500,000 in commercial income, but given that this property has separate streams, that would kind of be double counting in this case.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's all my questions.
I'm just making, you're speaking faster than I can write. 1 second. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks. Mr. Whitbread, any questions?
I would just like you to go through that rent change again. I'm sorry, I missed parts of that.
No, you're good. I'll go through. Should I go through it from just the top down complete? Like the gross potential and
I don't think you have to do that. Just why did you change the rent?
so I left the gross potential and the vacancy the same, but the EGI changed because I had about $500,000 of commercial income that was included in this multifamily valuation. So I took out the commercial income because it's valued independently for this property and we're not contesting it. So that changed the EGI to $4,061,601.
I'm looking at page 25. There's some notes on page 25 to show the gross potential suite income or your rent.
Yes.
3,902,941.
Yeah, so from page 25, so I'm using that bottom line information for 390 million, but then I would note that they have quite a bit of vacancy, so their actual rent is only
Yeah.
3.9.
I think it said 23% or something, did it not? On one of your statements, on one of your financials, 23.02%.
Yeah, I think they wrote in 23, but that might be inclusive of the entire property, not just the residential.
Okay. Although it says, oh, I see. Number 10, 11. Yeah, it's really hard to tell from that statement, isn't it? Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. My questions have been answered. Is there a need for a summary from either party?
Yeah, just a quick one, like, because the reported expenses are inclusive of the commercial, and there's no way to separate them out. You can't just pile them all in the residential stream and then use that to come up with an NOI. That's my summation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have a summary?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just give me 1 second, please. Sorry, thank you. All right, we can move on to the next property on this afternoon's docket, which is number 4. This is 333 Vaughan. And this one, you are appealing class liability and value. Is that correct, Ms. Cates?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you're ready.
Okay, thank you very much. File number 24-3218, roll number 130523702003333 Vaughan Street. So it is a seniors life lease building. We've got 15 million on the institutional school tax exempt portion. And then we've got 1,221,000 on the 60 commercial classification for a total value of 17,061,1988. 130 suites, 47 indoor, 8 outdoor parking spots. One moment, let's see. Okay. On to the next page, you'll see that they've been good handing in their mailers, no recent sales. Page 3 shows 130 total units. The mix is 10 bachelor, 69 one bedroom, and 51 two bedroom. So the average monthly rent by the model for the apartment is $1,137.45 with our model cap rate of 5.7. Generates 15,840,000 or a market value per suite of 121,846. Commercial, we've got 12% vacancy, gross potential rent of 116,878, and then 7% cap. That's how we get to our estimated market value. You can see on the next page the sizes of the commercial area. They range from 596 to 4,704, and the rent per square foot ranges from 12 to about 16 and a half. Rent comparables for the apartment side are on page 5. It looks like we do have an agreement though, in regards to the rents. So that's not something that I'm gonna really belabor, but the rent assigned by the model is 1,137. And a CMHC analysis as well, because this is a senior's life lease. Tenants, they pay like an entrance fee to get in, several thousands of dollars. The more of an entrance fee, that they pay in, the lower their monthly amount is. When they leave, that entrance fee, I believe, is refundable. Not with interest, but refundable on the base amount. There's some more documentation further on in my brief in regards to that from their website. The comparable office leases here to support the model rates range from 10 to 21, being on the high end of the scale, but it's also the smallest one. And then we have our cap rate limits on page 10 and 11. And then we have on page 13 the description of the building and the amenities it entails. So, I mean, I'm not going to read them out to you. You guys can first read them on your own enjoyment. And then, so on page 14, it shows on the top box, the FAQ, it says, will I receive interest on my equity contribution, which is the entrance fee I measure? It say, no, you will not be paid interest on your equity contribution since it will be used to keep your monthly rent at a lower level than comparable apartments. So, and then the one after is how much you have to pay in rent. Your rent depends on the size of your equity contribution, the cost of an apartment that you select. So the larger the equity contribution, the lower the monthly rent. So that's why we're looking at the market on this one. You can't use the actuals. Page 16 looks pretty nice on the inside there. Looks like they've been fixing the place up quite well. This is from their website. So you're scrolling through that. Looks like they got like a little library in there as well. And then you have the overall income and expense from leading up to March of 2023, which is right up against our reference date. So given the operation just went with the model, looks like they've been fixing it up. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cates. Do you have any questions for the assessor?
I don't have any new questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McFadden.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Nor do I. So, Ms. Cates, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $11,747,000 on the 40S portion and $306,000 on the class code 60 for a total of $12,053,000. On page 6, we have our property site maps. Exterior photo on page 7. And on page 8, property description. So the subject is on the east side of Vaughan, at its intersection with Ellis in the Portage Ellis area, is a 17-story building built in the late 80s. There are 130 units, 47 indoor parking stalls, and there is commercial space on the main floor. If you turn to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach on the multifamily. So the property is a life lease. The tenants pay a refundable entrance fee, and rent is based on the operating costs of the property, including repair and maintenance and reserve expenditures. So based on this, the rents may not be deemed to be at market in a life lease. So we are not disputing the current rents in place of $1,774,422 or $1,137 per unit per month. We are applying a market vacancy rate of 4.3%. And for the expenses, we were able to review the actuals and do a 3-year stabilization. So we are applying expenses of $1,044,279 or 61.5% of effective gross income. With our cap rate on page 14. So we are applying a cap rate of 5.75%. Our base cap rate for a property this age would be 5.5%. And I would consider a 0.25% adjustment for the location. As well, there is limited parking. So if you turn to page 16, we have our income and expense workup. So we have an effective gross income of $1,698,122. So our expenses, I apologize, it's only a 2-year stabilization. So our expenses are including repair and maintenance at $2,000 a suite. It is perhaps a bit on the higher side, but then we're not adding in anything extra for reserve expenditures. It's all kind of encapsulated in that amount. For a market apartment, typically we would consider repair and maintenance between $1,800 and $2,200 to be within range of a well-managed apartment. Sometimes it might be a bit lower, $1,500 a suite, sometimes it could be higher, especially if you have different styles. But I would consider $2,000 a suite to be in range, but maybe a bit on the higher side for this type of property. I note that the property is 40S, and since 40S properties have special treatment of the taxes, as in they don't pay school taxes, our typical method for calculating the taxes would be to still do it at a class code 20 value. The reason being, if the property transacted, and it wasn't operating as a seniors facility, then they wouldn't necessarily get that special treatment of taxes. So that's the typical protocol that we do for 40S, is we calculate the class code 20 taxes. So we have total expenses, as mentioned, of $1,044,279. We have a net operating income of $653,843, and with a 5.75% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $11,371,000. On page 18, we have an overview of our valuation of the OFB office stream. So we note that the property has gross leases in place. So given that the financials of these properties would typically be combined for the residential and commercial, we don't have an exact amount to deduct from the commercial leases to kind of convert them from gross to net. We would estimate that the unrecovered expenses would probably be in the range of $8 to $10. But we've also then looked to rent comps in order to further support the rents that we're applying. So our rent comps indicate a range of $8.12 a square foot to $15 a square foot, has an average of $12.70 a square foot. We're applying a rent on the lower end of the range at $9 a square foot to better reflect the finishes and quality of the subject property. For vacancy, if you follow me at page 19, we're applying a market vacancy of 12%, shortfall of $14 a square foot, expenses at 3%. And on page 20, for the cap rate, from our office cap rate study, I've provided just an excerpt in the brief. For OFB properties, our base cap rates would be 7.25% to 7.75%. So I'm applying a 7.5% to this property to better reflect. So on page 21, we have the income summary for the OFB portion. So for the office, we would request a total assessment of $682,000. Now on page 23, we are considering the classification of the property. So under section 23(1)(e) of the Municipal Assessment Act, I've included the excerpt in the appendix. We note that the organization that is operating in this property, if you follow me to page 27, so they are the Social Planning Council of Winnipeg. They're a registered charity. And if you go to page 28, it speaks on some of the programs. So this would fall under the category like relief of indigent or sick persons. And if you go to page 28, you'll see some of the programs that they do. So they do work around anti-poverty, anti-gang, stuff like that. So there's more details provided there. And then I've also included their annual report. Then page 35 of the appendix, we have some marketing photos So these were just snipped from a marketing video that they had, so I've included those. And then the financials that we've looked at. So to summarize. I'll just read out the values again. So to summarize then, for the class code 60, if the school tax exemption was granted, then that would indicate a value of $306,000. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Assessor. Do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yes, I do. So for your stabilization on page 16 for the residential component, did you strip out the commercial expenses associated with the gross leases in place to come up with a stabilized expense amount?
So for the residents, the only expense that I took, that would be residential purely, would be the taxes. So this is quite a large property, while the commercial, I think it's about 8,000 square feet. It's not a huge proportion of the property overall. So in terms of, yeah, you could definitely look at maybe doing some adjustment to potentially utilities or some sort of R&M, but I felt like that was captured because I am using a lot lower R&M than they're reporting. And additionally, you know, when it is a small proportion to start trying to take out those amounts, it doesn't always, it's not going to be a meaningful effect on the residential, but no, other than the taxes, I didn't strip out those expenses.
Okay, so just further on the R&M, it looks like based on the amount and based on the pictures we've seen, would you agree it looks like they're renovating the interior of the units?
Yeah, based on the photos that I saw from your brief, yeah, I would say it looks like that. I didn't see those photos when I was looking in the video, but yes, I would say it looks like they're doing some work to the property.
So, while you didn't include those renovation expenses in the overall R&M, given that they nonetheless occurred, would that not fall into putting downward pressure on the cap rate?
In terms of like lowering the base cap rate that I'm using?
Well, no, but I mean, lowering, like if you're not accounting for the fact that it's being renovated and the expenses, like the overall condition of the building. I know you've made adjustments for you said buildings in poor condition, you apply a premium. Would you not push it the other way too if they've just been renovated?
So our base cap rates would account for good quality properties in good locations. That's why we don't typically do adjustments to account for condition being good or location being good. So typically we wouldn't, but the only adjustment I made here was for location. I already noted that the condition was probably somewhere between average to good after seeing the photos in your brief, closer to good, for sure.
Okay, and then just in regards to the classification thing you're asking for, what is the classification you want the commercial to be switched to? Because on the first page, or rather the second page, it still says CC 60 beside 306.
Yeah, because it wouldn't, because that's only because the tenant is not in the whole commercial space, there still would be like a CC 60 element, because the whole main floor is assessed as OFB.
Okay, so you're saying that you're saying space that ought to be exempt ought not to be assessed? Is that?
No, it
correct?
should be, so I guess, so the tenant that I'm referring to there, they occupy 4,704 square feet of the total main floor. So I'm suggesting that their assessment should be added on to the 40S portion.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of all blends together because the life lease is already 40S.
Oh yeah, I see. I see what you're I see what you're saying now. And let me see here. And then just using your lease comparables, like you applied $9 rents, but all your lease comparables, most of them look like they're in the $12 to $15 range. Why did you go for 9?
I wanted to go for a rent on the lower end, because I feel that the space is probably a lower quality than these comps.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
Have you actually made application to the city? Is there not an application process for this exemption?
There is a process. I have not proceeded with the administrative route yet.
Okay, and secondly, if we take a look at page 26 of your brief, where you're talking about the act, and it specifically lays out what qualifies as school tax exempt. So it's elderly persons, let's see, a charitable organization primarily for the purpose of giving relief or assistance to the aged, indigent, or sick persons. But looking at what the Social Planning Council does, it seems to be primarily advocacy type of work. They collect census data in support of other programs. They don't actually deliver programs to people. They deliver their services to the agencies that are actually giving support to the people. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I agree that based on what I looked at, it didn't look like they're actually hosting programs. So
Right.
I didn't intend to mislead if I unintentionally said that, so that's my apologies.
You still think that however qualifies under the act?
Well, it doesn't seem to specify under this section that they had to specifically be running programs. So that's why I figured I would present what I had and leave it to the board's discretion.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions?
I'm just questioning the 2 vacancies. Let me go to page 21. Do you know what was in those 2 vacancies prior to them becoming vacant?
It looked like they were vacant for some time, so I wasn't able to tell what was in there. I know the tenancies at this property had changed. Like this is from the 2022 mailer, but at the time of, creating the brief, I note that even, units 1 and 2 had changed. So the Social Planning Council kind of seemed to be the consistency of this property. But no, I don't know what was in these vacant, because when I was looking back, they looked vacant as well.
Yeah, because the scheme of your wanting to change the classification here would change if that was a 7-Eleven and a Tim Hortons, wouldn't it? I see Social Planning Council, I see Governing Council, I see Language Pathology. I could see tax exempted those perhaps, but not knowing what's going in those vacancies makes it challenging.
Yeah, that's why I kept the portion for the other tenancies as just class code 60, because we don't know what's in there. Like I said, like the tenants in 1 and 2 have also since moved out. So I was just contemplating the social planning unit.
Yeah, but you do have another avenue and that you can make application yourself to the city. I think that was mentioned. Thanks, I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. My questions have been answered. Is there a need for summary from either party?
I think I'm okay. Just a quick break. I'm getting attacked by the sun here in the room and I got to switch.
No problem. Just 1 minute. Ms. Case?
I'm good as well, thank you.
All right. So on that note, why don't we just take a brief recess? So and then we can reconvene, let's say in about 5 minutes and finish up. How does that sound?
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody. We will proceed with the next matter on this afternoon's docket, number 7, Evergreen Place. Mr. Assessor, please proceed when you are ready. And you are muted. There you are. Okay.
Thank you. File 24-2502, roll number 1203-2534000, 7 Evergreen Place. 2 lines of classification, 30 million in total. Commercial components, 3,273,000. Residential is 26,932,000. 1981, we don't have an effective year built on it, even though we might ought to, based on the photos we've seen. 26 stories, 174 suites, and 110 indoor, 147 outdoor parking spots. Page 2 shows a good request from income information history, and then on page 3, we've got an even split between 1 and 2 bedrooms. Average monthly rent is 1520.47. Cap is 6.05, which I think is too high, but I'm not gonna change it because that would result in an increase, which is something I would have had to apply for 10 days ago. So got to leave the model cap as is. 154 per unit, 26,932,000 on the apartment, and then we've got our commercial parameters to the right of it, 6.9 cap, 3,273,000 on the income. Got the sizes of the units on page 4, which range from 1,000 square feet all the way up to 1,535. Then we've got the rent comparables on page 5. So looking around the Osborne Village area, the comparables bracket the subject property comparable leases also as well. Kind of like looking in the Osborne Village area, they support the commercial modeled rates. In fact, they're higher. Then we've got our cap rate evidence on 7 and 8. And then we've got some pictures on page 10. So there's newly restyled penthouses, sleek contemporary finish. It's on the river. All new kitchens, bathrooms, luxury plank form, new stainless steel appliances. You got in-suite laundry. There's a free membership. They got like a gym on the property as well. Lots of parking. It's an Osborne Village, so it's a very attractive area to own a rental property. Under fully equipped suites, Seeing Grace has many newly remodeled suites. So, I mean, it does look like they are remodeling it. We have a 6 cap in Osborne Village. We don't have an effective age. So I think that ought to change. But again, this is not the mechanism here for me to do so. Then some further description in regards to the unit sizes on page 13. It's got like a pretty nice looking gym. It's got a pool. Some of them have balconies that face the Red River, or one of the rivers there. And then you got some pictures of the interior of the building in regards to the units, and also it's the pool and the gym. So on page 22, you can see that there's actually quite a massive amount of repair and maintenance being reported. So that's in line with what they're saying in terms of the suite renovation. So we just went with the model on this one. Again, the expenses are combined, the commercial and residential. So, I mean, if you can't separate them out, then you can't really just pile them all in the residential side of the coin. Say, if they're comparative, because they're comparatively, it's a small area, it doesn't matter. But I mean, when you're looking at on a gross basis, the owner taking care of the property taxes, the advertising, the maintenance, and the utilities, it is actually a notable enough figure. One would think that if you can't separate it out, you can't really just pile them all on the res side, because that's going to bring down the res value. And then the rest of it is just some of the rental rate information, and then on the last page shows the gross leasing amount. So just on the model, looks like they're renovating. I think the cap is too high, but they don't have a mechanism to change it because it will result in an increase. So I'm asking for confirmation. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, thank you. So in terms of your comments with the residential cap rate, has the city's position for this cycle not been that smaller properties can be purchased by a larger pool, and so they have lower cap rates, but larger properties can only have institutional investors, so they should have larger cap rates? So what's the distinction with this property?
Well, I mean, that is one factor. Like if you know, we had like a 8-plex walk up, you know, next door on the river, then yeah, the cap rate ought to be lower. But there's other factors, including clearly renovating and the desirability of the neighborhood, the amenities, ample parking. So it's more than one factor that goes into it. So I just think for Osborne Village, 6 cap, especially when we're looking at the other properties on the docket earlier, I really feel that it is too high. I'm not touching it, but I really feel this one should be, strongly feel this one should be confirmed.
And then in regard to the office space, you would agree that like office space in an apartment would probably be considered lower quality compared to other suburban offices in the city, right?
I think that because this one, like what you're saying, I get what you're saying, like it is pushed back a bit. I don't know, we're familiar with the area, but when you look at my rents on page 6, they're all pretty much, the rent comps are pretty much higher than what the model's assigning. So I think that's kind of baked in the valuation already.
Okay, and then in terms of the cap rates on page 8, the city doesn't make a distinction between OFS A class and OFS B class, is that correct?
In terms of the office cap rates,
Yes.
well, downtown A says 6.5, and then downtown B says 7.
But for the suburban ones, like, cause I know that it says
Oh,
A suburban B, but then they look like they're the same rate.
that's correct. Yep, that's correct.
Okay. That would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No, I have none, thank you.
Nor do I. Ms. Cates, please proceed with your presentation when you're ready.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessments of 23,726,000 for the CC20 and 2,648,000 for the CC60 for a total of $26,374,000. On page 6, we have the property site maps and then an exterior photo on page 7 and 8. Property description on page 9. So the subject property is on Evergreen Place, west of Osborne Street in the Roslyn area. It is a 26-story building built in the early 80s. There are 174 units. And the property, we note from the rent roll, contains commercial space of 19,209 square feet. That's what we've used in our analysis. So it's an area discrepancy with what the city's listed area is. And the commercial space would include main floor area as well as units that are used as offices. So that would be 1 bachelor, 3 1-bedrooms, and 5 2-bedrooms. The property is Assiniboine adjacent, but typically what we find with multi-residential properties is that tenants won't typically pay more or much more comparatively to what they would pay for a unit without the view. On page 14, we have the overview of our income approach for the multifamily. So we are applying potential market gross rents of $2,864,290 or $1,372 per unit per month, based on the actual income reported for the subject. The subject has some elevated vacancy. We're applying a rate of 5%. And regarding the expenses, based on our review, we are applying an expense allowance of $1,649,666 or 53.7% of effective gross income. The property has experienced a high amount of repair and maintenance over an extended period of time. So we provide a 5-year breakdown of repair and maintenance, but then I've also included a couple of prior years here from 16 and 17, just to show the pattern that what's happening in the last couple of years isn't necessarily unusual for the property. On page 15, we have our cap rate for the subject. We're using a cap rate of 6%. Our base cap rate for a property of this age would be 5.5%. And I note that based on the property's good condition and the scale of the property, it requires regular and significant investment to maintain. So for context, we're capturing about 1.65 million of expenses in the stabilization, but they're actually consistently putting in closer to between 2 million to 2.3 million. So that presents a risk to the income stream. So if you turn to page 17, we have our income and expense breakdown. So when accounting for the additional parking income, we have an effective gross income of $3,073,204. What I've done with the expenses for this property, since it is a larger proportion of commercial area here, is I've broken them out or attempted to break out what would be residential and commercial by using a proportional method. So I'm using, so the commercial would be about 10% estimated. So what I've done, as you can see in the remarks, is for insurance, professional fees, and what else do we have? Some wages, like I've portioned those out by 90% to try to be as reasonable as possible with the expenses applied to the apartment here. I've gone in and also calculated the class code 20 taxes, so that won't be blending any commercial expense, and realistically where most of the commercial expenses would be captured would be in the taxes. So we are capping the repair and maintenance as well at $2,500 a suite. So if you go to page 18, you could see the trends in repair and maintenance. In 2020, they did start breaking out what would be considered major or extraordinary repairs. Prior to that, I don't believe they were doing that. But either way, they are investing a significant amount in the property that's not captured in the valuation. So we are capping it at $2,500. That would be the high end of what we'd consider for market, but it is quite a bit lower than what they're actually spending. So we have a net operating income of $1,423,537 with a 6% cap rate, gives an indicated value rounded of $23,726,000. On page 19, we have a overview of the suburban office valuation. So the property would be primarily owner occupied. This is where they'd have their head office in those, primarily in those upper units. There are also some main floor tenants that would be on a gross basis. So the gross leases would be in the $17 to $20 a square foot range. Again, we'd estimate unrecovered expenses to be in the range of $8 to $10 a square foot. Pulled some rent comparables as well for review in terms of, so I pulled some for main floor units, and then on page 20, I also have some for upper floor units. So given that this is space in an apartment, It's gonna be lower quality than a lot of other suburban office in Winnipeg. So what I've done is I've applied a rental rate kind of in the middle of the range that I found. So for the main floor space, I'm applying $11.50 a square foot net. And then for the upper floor space, we're applying $11 a square foot net. So on page 20, for vacancy, we're applying 6% market. Shortfall, $8 a square foot. 3% expense ratio. And then on page 21, we have an excerpt from our cap rate study. So we have divided the suburban office A and suburban office B. So this property, we would consider suburban office B, given that it is lower quality space in the apartment. That has a range of 6.75 to 9.5%. So we're applying a 7% cap rate to the office portion. So on page 22, all those figures are worked up for your review. And so then, and I'm also, again, to reiterate, using the area that's on the rent roll, not necessarily from the city records. So there's a discrepancy there. And so that would give the indicated value of $2,648,000 rounded on the commercial. So to summarize, on page 24, total combined assessment would be $26,374,000. We have an appendix on page 25. I've included marketing photos as well as the financials that we've reviewed. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Assessor, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just a couple. Just going to page 17. Given the area the property's in, the overall renovated state of the units, ample parking and unit split, do you think a 6 cap might be a bit too high, especially in comparison to the other properties we've seen on the docket today with lower caps?
I don't believe a 6% is too high for this specific property, given that the cap rate is capturing the risk to the income stream. So you're right, it's in a good location and it has good features about it. But in terms of the cost to maintain this type of property, that would speak to risk implied in that income stream versus when we look at the properties earlier that had lower rents, there's less risk that they wouldn't achieve that. But yeah, I agree with your points that it's in a good location and it has good features.
Okay, so just to be clear, the repairs and maintenance, that's, you can confirm that's not money being spent to renovate the suites, that's for something else?
I didn't say that. I think repairs and maintenance are inclusive of suite repairs, common area, things like that. I don't have a breakdown though, so we're just kind of looking at the totals, but not really capturing most of that. We're just capping it at 2,500.
Okay, and then just for your comparables here on page 19, I noticed you chose a number that were on Scurfield as comparators. Isn't that a bit far away from the subject property? It's for lease comparables?
Yeah, it's not in the immediate vicinity, but I was trying to find similar sized suburban office in terms of the units, like in terms of the main floor units, because they are on the smaller end.
All right. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, do you have any questions?
I do. So this is not an insignificant difference in the leasable space. If you actually, and you can clarify this, Mr. Barakis, for me, but I think your blended rent is only $969, but you're spreading it over 27,000 square feet versus her 1116 over 19,000 square feet. That's where the biggest difference here. So it seems to me that that difference in square footage that's leasable is a fairly significant thing for us to consider.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we have on record in terms of the commercial area.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if on the rent roll there are vacant commercial spaces that aren't being reported because they're not collecting rent, but I'm just going by what we have in our system based on our records.
Because if you applied your rent to her square footage, this assessment would go down fairly significantly.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you remove the square footage,
Yeah.
then of
So
course,
I think
yes.
it's important to actually understand what's the real square footage.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to load up the record right now, but I'm having problems, but it's just gonna tell me. So I know 1, 2, 3. So I know 3 of the premises I have is Shelter Canadian Properties, which I suppose is the property manager. And let me see on the rent roll if it's indicated how many premises. 15,000 for Shelter Canadian. Yeah, I'm not sure why the number is different. I can only go by what we have on record.
And you can't provide, with applicants, you can't apply, provide any further clarification on that either.
In terms of their records, I'm not sure, but I was using the rent roll that they supply, and that's included in the index on page, let me find it.
Page 19.
Correct.
Yeah, and then the yeah, like on page 38, they show like an area that's quite a bit less than the 27,000.
Yep. I'm trying to pull up our commercial income report right now because I see Dr. Valdine, I see Cooper Rankin, and then I see, sorry, it's loading, Shelter Canadian. I'm just wondering if there's not something there's a premise that's vacant, that's not accounted for, but I see at the bottom of 38, it says nothing is vacant. Let me, computer's still loading, I apologize here.
Well, I have a follow-up question to page 38 while we're on it. Sorry, we're kind of going out of order here, but for the CKUW Radio Society, it says square feet and there's nothing in there.
Yeah, that one looks like it's on the roof,
Oh, it's okay, yeah.
some sort of license.
Okay.
Okay, let me see this here. So we got the income report up now. And so I see Shelter Canadian at 15,035. Then I see Cooper Rankin at 1760. And then, sorry, this thing's programmed that I was supposed to pull it up from. Froze. So it looks like we do have a premise here at 6,341 leasable square feet at $9.81 assigned to Shelter Canadian Properties. And we also have 15 assigned to Shelter Canadian Properties. So I'm not sure
where
if
are you
they're
looking
renting
now?
out a separate space as well.
Where are you looking?
Well,
get
I'm
the
looking
number.
at the rent roll, and then I'm looking at an income report.
So page 38?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So we have Shelter Canadian. The rent roll says 15,035. And then we have that as,
But stop there for a minute. What's the total occupied? 19,209, correct?
yeah, 19,209, but that doesn't mean that there's not space that's not occupied. They are reporting that, but we have another premise here.
And where is that?
Uh,
Give us a page.
it's premise, sorry, let me pull up. I'd have to pull up my evidence. So that would be premise 13497.
Give us a page number, please.
Oh, sorry, that's page 4
Of your evidence, correct?
of my evidence, yes. So we have that in our system also allocated to Shelter Canadian. So that is one large difference we found. So I don't know. Like that, I presume that premise didn't just disappear. And we have it on record as being a rentable space. So perhaps Shelter's just not reporting it. But I'm only going by what we have.
Yeah.
In our records.
Well, I think it would be good to resolve this.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Comes back.
Fair table. Let me see if we got any notes on that. Yeah, I'm not sure why that space is not being reported. I don't have a blueprint or anything I could pull up and review and count right now. But perhaps an inspection ought to occur and a sup go out if required.
Well, Ms. McFadden, perhaps the applicant can answer your question.
Correct.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, it's just you have no record of this additional space that the city has, the 6,000, almost 7,000 square feet. That's not in your list.
Yeah, that's not in the records, and I have no reason to believe that this property manager / owner would intentionally not report space, so clearly it'll need to be investigated to determine the cause.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No, I have the same questions. Thank you.
I think we all went through that pretty thoroughly, so I think I guess at this point, is there a need for summary from either party?
Yeah, I mean, there's some other commercial spaces. I just noticed as well, like Dr. Valdine Scott is 868. And then like, it just looks like we need to inspect this property and maybe clean up the commercial records. Because we have that premise area as 1,037. So we just need some clarification in regards to the square footages. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Ms. Cates?
No summary required, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I guess that takes us to number 6 on the docket, which is 11 Evergreen Place. So, Mr. Baracus, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you. Okay, file 24-2503, roll number 12032532500, 11 Evergreen Place, 2 lines of classification, 24,257,000 in total, 1984. It's right beside the property we just discussed. 1984, 176 suites, 63 indoor parking, 86 outdoor parking. Page 3 shows the rental workup. This one does have more 1 bedrooms than 2 bedrooms, hence the lower rents. This one, it does have a slightly lower cap, but again, I still think the cap is too high, but I'm not going to change it and ask for an increase because I can't. Overall market value per suite is 129. The last one was 154. It makes sense. This one's got way more 1 bedrooms. 68% 1 bedrooms. We got our commercial work up here on beside the apartment column. 6.1 cap rate, estimated market value 1,508,000. So I use the same columns as I did for the last property for the commercial and residential, and kind of like the same supporting documentation as well. They're marketed together. So the balance of the brief, other than the income and expense mailer, is the same. Again, heavy amount of renovations listed. Combined expenses can't really separate them, so just went with the model. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions for the assessor?
Yes, just one, thank you. So regarding the cap rate on the office at 6.1%, it seems quite a bit lower than the last one, but would you also agree that based on page 8 and the broker information, that would be considered pretty low for the suburban office category?
See here, 6.1.
Yeah.
That does fall within the middle of the range by the looks of it.
But in terms of the broker information that you also have, that would be pretty close to the bottom of the range.
Oh, the broker information. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like, when I think of Osborne Village, I don't think of the suburbs, you know what I mean? I think of it more as a downtown type neighborhood, to be honest. So I would look more towards those rates if we're comparing the brokers. But again, the model assigned it as 6.1. That's what it assigned. So I really don't have any further comment on that.
Okay, that would conclude my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. McFadden, any questions for the assessor?
Sorry, I may have missed this in your presentation. The expense ratio for the residential portion is quite a bit higher than the last building, they're very similar. I'm just wondering if you can explain why the model would have applied a higher rate.
Sorry, let me pull up the last one.
Well, it was 47% as opposed to 53%.
Oh, yeah, well.
Much
I,
different to what the applicant is talking about.
yeah. Let me pull this up. It's a very good question.
It just seems odd that the model would do it so differently.
Oh, let me, 7, okay. Yeah, you would think they would be the same, they should be the same. I mean, if you're gonna be modeling the same kind of property. Yeah, 46, so I'm not sure, why.
Okay,
That's a very good question.
thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, as am I. Thank you very much. Ms. Cates, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessments of 22,195,000 on the class code 20 and 1,181,000 on the class code 60 for a total value of $23,376,000. We have the property maps on page 6, exterior photos on page 7 and 8, property description on page 9. So there are 176 units of the property. There is main floor leasable area. And the property is Assiniboine adjacent. If you go to page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. So we are applying potential market gross rents of $2,969,860 or $1,406 per unit per month, based on the actual income reported for the property. The property has higher vacancy, so we are applying a bit of a higher rate at 7.5%. And for the expenses, we've reviewed 3 years of data and we are applying $1,471,169 or 52.5% of effective gross income. Again, a lot of funds are invested into the property and it has a history of that for the last several years. On page 15, we have our cap rate for the property. We are applying a cap rate of 6%, which is similar to the prior property. Again, there's we are capturing about 1.4 million of expenses in the stabilization, but they're actually regularly investing between 1.7 and 1.9 million dollars in the property. It requires significant and regular investment to maintain properties of this scale. So if you turn to page 17, we have our income and expense breakdown. So when accounting for the other income, we have an effective gross income of $2,802,858. We're using repair and maintenance capped at $2,500 a unit. We have also calculated the class 20 taxes, and then we've portioned out expenses that can be potentially shared among the residential and commercial at a rate of 95% toward the residential, based on the commercial area being a smaller proportion of the property at about maybe 5%. So we have a net operating income of $1,332,000 with a 6% cap rate, gives an indicated value of $22,195,000. Repair and maintenance on page 18. We have our office valuation on page 19. So we have used the units that are listed on the rent roll. So I believe there's a slight area discrepancy between the city's records, but nothing major. And we're using the same rent comps, the same rental rates as previously. Page 20, we're using vacancy of 6%, shortfall of $8 a square foot, non-recovered expenses of 3%. Page 21, we have our cap rate. So we are looking to the suburban category. That's what the property is classified as. So that is the category we're using. And we're applying a cap rate of 7%. We have the income approach on page 22, which shows all of the values. So that gives an indicated value of $1,181,000 rounded. And then the appendix starts on page 25. And again, it's similar photos. Although I've added in some photos that are specific to this property, those are on the first few pages. And then the remaining photos, since they are jointly owned, we market them together, the remaining photos will be the same. And then the property's financials also follow for your review. And that would conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barakis, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I just asked that my questions from the last property apply to this one. And also in regards to the comments in regards to spaces we have mutually assigned with different square footages, the property needs to be reviewed on a commercial square foot basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McFadden.
Sorry, I didn't catch your last sentence, the last comment that you were saying.
Yeah, there's a few spaces I see that are both like assigned to companies
Okay,
on the rent roll and within our records, but the square footage that's being submitted to us is not the square footage we have on file. So the commercial, like the last property,
Correct.
needs to be measured.
yeah, it's not quite as big of a difference, but there's still a,
Yeah, still, I don't know if it's a reporting thing or we need to correct both or it's been redemised. I'm not sure.
yeah, okay. Thank you. That's all my questions. Oh, yes, that's it.
Okay, Mr. Whitbread, do you have any questions?
No, I have none. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm just going through here. No, my questions have been answered, so that's fine. Thank you very much. Is there a need for summary from either party?
No, thanks.
I'm good as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Well, we have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon.